So I got this WhatsApp message from a client of ours. With the latest Renters' Rights Act coming into law, it's causing a hurricane of noise in the media and have new and experienced landlords questioning themselves and whether property is the right thing to do. Hi, my name is Dwayne Squires, and for myself and clients, we buy around 60 plus investment properties a year, and I've been in property for more than 10 plus years. In this video, I just wanted to share my honest view on the Renters' Rights Bill. I don't want to record it to create any hype or concerns. Really, I'm just recording it for my investor community, just to give them a better understanding and to know how to plan for the way ahead. There's not going to be this dramatic editing, and there's no scripting at all, literally just off the cuff giving you my honest feedback. To start, I want to give you kind of a bit of background. I'm usually a very calm and collected person, just my nature. But it was in 2024, after the budget, that I saw a different side of myself, getting really annoyed, really angry about the situation, because the Chancellor announced that stamp duties were going to increase, not in 6 months' time, not in 3 months' time, not in 12 months' time, but literally the next day. And we had several transactions going through, and that caused a lot of concern, because obviously it went from a stamp duty of 3% to 5%, effectively nearly a 60% increase, meaning that a lot of our investors and myself had to fork up thousands of pounds just to pay that extra stamp duty. Typically, you would have time to prepare for this, but it was a next day event. So really it was a stealth tax, unprepared, just causing more distrust of the government. But things played out, all the transactions completed. It got me to really think that actually sometimes it's best to stay calm and collective. It's a similar story when we went through COVID, and there was a period of time where tenants weren't paying, tenants were moving out, there was loads of media hype, and within a few months, again, things played out, and a year later, our business rocketed because the demand was so high. So I just wanted to give you that context. The Renters' Rights Bill is new. There's some big changes. It's a generational change. But sometimes, especially for myself, it's just about taking time to stay calm, collective, and assess the situation objectively. So I've got a few points that I noted down that I wanted to discuss in this video. So let's just start off with what is the Renters' Rights Act. So when you look through history, the last few years, the Conservative governments were proposing something similar, but the new Labour government actually introduced it with some key changes actually that I will share later. But ultimately, the purpose of the Act, in the own words of the government, is to create a functioning private rented sector that will provide a secure stepping stone for aspiring homeowners and flexibility for those who want to rent. So effectively, the purpose is more just to create a system where it's fair for tenants and gives fairness for landlords. So to kind of give structure to this video, I'm gonna share the key points in the Act, what to be aware of and things to consider, and especially what I'm considering. And I'll give you my honest feedback, both on a macro level and a micro level, how I'm going to prepare for myself and our clients as well. So the first and primary change is the removal of fixed term tenancies. Typically, the current type of setup is a tenant would sign a tenancy with a fixed term of 6 to 12 months. And at the end of that term, they would renew on a monthly basis or look to sign another 6 to 12 month tenancy and go on and so forth. So that's now all changed. So it's now removed that. And now tenancies are on a rolling basis. So actually, tenants can give 2 months notice, which was always a case after the 6 month period, but now it can start from day one. The second major change is the removal of a Section 21 notice. So the Section 21 notice was actually for the benefit of landlords, where landlords could issue a Section 21 notice within the fixed term period and even going forth past that period, where they could then gain possession of the property. It was a really useful way where maybe you had a tenant that had a lot of antisocial behavior, or because they missed their rent. Rather than going through a convoluted, expensive court system, you just issue a Section 21, and then by law that tenant should move out within a 2 month period. So that's now been removed. But let's focus on those two parts of the Act, because those are the biggest ones that are coming into effect. But this is why it's interesting for me, because we're in an era of having that. But 1988, I don't want to give away my age, was a couple of years before I was born. 1988 was a key year for renters and landlords because it introduced the 1988 Housing Act. And that effectively introduced the fixed term and the Section 21. Before that, there was no ability to move a tenant out without introducing the clause. Effectively, tenants had an assured tenancy, they stayed in the property. Unless courts removed them, they would be staying in that property for a lifetime. And similarly, because there was the intention that they would stay in that property for a lifetime, there was no need to have a Section 21 as well. But when we look through history, property prices, even prior to 1988, rents were increasing. So when we reflect on that, after the Renters' Rights Act actually comes into effect, is that going to kill property? Is it going to kill property prices? Is it going to kill rents going up? No, I don't see that happening. I actually think it could actually support rents going up. It could support prices going up as well. But it's just about being more professional and prepared, as I'll share a bit more later on in the video. So let's move on to more parts of the app. So another part being introduced is that now for rents to increase, you need to formalize it through serving a Section 13, and you can only increase the rents every 12 months. While some tenancies could have been increasing the rents within the 12-month period. Number one, Section 13s have been around for a long time. Actually, that's how they've always been formalized. Or sometimes there would have been a verbal agreement and the tenant just signs a new tenancy. Now what they're saying here is you have to formalize it with a Section 13. So the part that annoys me is a small change but a big change, is that yes, you could always serve a Section 13, but if a tenant ever had a challenge, they could raise it to a tribunal, and that was always the case. But previously, from the date it was raised as a rent increase, if a tribunal supported the decision of the rent increase, the rent difference could be backdated to the date that the landlord raised the rent. But now, the rent can only be increased once the tribunal have made a decision. So there's no back payment of the rent increase. This could be, for scrupulous tenants, their way of saying, well, I'm going to postpone and delay paying the rent increase by going to a tribunal, and then it could take months on end, who knows? It can vary by location to location. That's the annoying part, but I think the positive here is that the challenge you have is a lot of landlords, when they have good tenants in place, they don't typically increase their rents on a regular basis. What they do is they say, oh, the tenant looks after the property. I was even speaking to a friend yesterday. They bought their property like 6 years ago and they've never increased the rent. The tenant pays now is around $750, but rent in that area is now £1,000. So they haven't increased it. And a lot of landlords don't increase it because they say, well, I've got a good tenant and I want them to be happy with the property and look after it. But this is now going to create, I think, a change in the environment, which is now landlords are going to have to increase the rent every year, even if the tribunal causes a delay. For those landlords that were never going to traditionally increase the rents, actually they're going to be more proactive about it. This could be to the detriment of tenants because ultimately 7 Section 13s was always the case, and typically we would only increase rents once a year and usually in line with inflation. But this just drives landlords to be more professional, to drive for the increase every year rather than them thinking, actually, I'm going to wait because I've got a good tenant. The next part of the act is introducing a private landlord database and a landlord ombudsman. For both of them, there's no set date of when that database comes into play or when the ombudsman comes into play. But when you look at the database, is going to be there to record landlords and effectively be a way for tenants to check if they're compliant. Now, for us as landlords, we need to be aware that you need to be registered, because if you then market a property and you're not registered, you're actually opening yourself to a can of worms, because there are fines that could come into play there, and they're hefty fines from £7,000 to £40,000. In terms of the ombudsman, I think this could be really positive because at the moment there is no ombudsman. From my experience being a property manager and letting agent as well, the ombudsman is really going to be supporting the ability to work alongside having the court system. So if a tenant and landlord had a dispute, they'd raise it to the ombudsman and they would make a decision on behalf of either the landlord or the tenant, meaning that you wouldn't necessarily have to go to the courts. It's similar with letting agents, where if a tenant raised a complaint and with the agent, we would go for an ombudsman, they would make a decision, it usually wouldn't go any further. So it could be to the benefit of us as landlords and to tenant, and I think it's just about how good that ombudsman is, how resourced are they, and how effective they are as well. So we'll move on to another part, which is about marketing of the property. Effectively now, when you market the property, you have to put a price on there. You can't actually allow bidding wars. So if your price is, let's say £1,000, you can't bid it any further than £1,000. it has to be up to 1,000. As well, when it comes to description, previously, especially for self-managing landlords, they would say no pets, no DSS, no benefit tenants. That's been removed. If there is marketing of that, you're going to be opening yourself to fines as well. To market, as I mentioned earlier, you'll need to be a registered landlord. In my personal experience, the rent that we charge or we market at, we don't look to create a bidding war. We look for the quality of the tenant. Is this going to be a tenant that can pay it consistently? If they are, that's who we want on board. But obviously in other parts of the country, especially down south in London, there might be bidding wars to get the rents up higher. So that doesn't cause a lot of concern. And to be honest, if you really want to, you would just market the property a bit higher than you plan to give you more scope. Now that comes to another part of the act, which is giving tenants more accessibility to have pets in the property and landlords not refusing them access to do so. The bit here which annoys me is that previously the act was going to allow us landlords to say to tenants, to allow you to have a tenant in place, you need to have insurance in place, or to charge more for the rent to allow for insurance to be put in place. I know previously I've had properties where it's tenanted with pets, and I've always just looked to increase the rent, usually around £50 more. If we're going to allow tenants to have pets, we want to have more protection. Tenants cause a lot more wear and tear and damage. I remember going back to when I was younger and I was a tenant myself. I was living in a HMO, a bit of a dodgy HMO anyway. One of the tenants had a dog, so we went out for fireworks and we came back and the property was trashed. The door was smashed, walls were scraped away, carpets were up. So when I look back at that, I would think the landlord would be pretty annoyed that a dog was there and the damage is caused. I am very much for making sure there's provisions for pets. But I look at it this way, there are reasonable grounds to reject tenants having pets in place. As part of your check-in process with the tenant, you would ask them if they've got pets. If you've got a lot of demand for that property, there's a bit of a grey area where you can say, well, this tenant that has a long history of paying versus another tenant having a long history of paying. One has a tenant, one doesn't. You could have more of a preference there. But I know a lot of tenants that have good pets. It's just a shame that we can't put provision in place for making sure the tenants have some type of insurance or pay an extra amount for that. So now let's move on to the next part of the act, which is more about the decent home standard, which is about driving up health and safety in the property. So effectively timeliness of repairs and not having properties being damp ridden and not resolving that quicker. I have no issues with that. I think that's very key. We should be providing quality properties for tenants where we want to uphold high standards that we would even live in ourselves. So I have no issues with timely repairs and making sure that damp and mold is at its minimum. Oh, one thing I forgot to share was there's been some changes to Section 8. At the moment there's Section 21, which allows a landlord to get possession of the property within 2 months, and then there's Section 8, which allows a landlord to apply to the courts to get grounds for that property. And there's mandatory and there's discretionary rights. So in both scenarios, the time period in which you can then apply to courts is increased. Now, there's one that I think is really important, which is Section 1(a), which is trying to get grounds for that property for either selling it or to live in it. You can't ask for that notification, or you can't apply to the courts for vacant possession within the first 12 months of a new tenancy, and then you still need to give a tenant 4 months notice. So the way I'm seeing it is you have to wait quite a long period of time to get access to sell that property if it's a new tenant, or to move into that property yourself. So I've gone through the key parts of the act that I think are important to be aware of and my view on it. So now I just want to share why, when I look at the act, I'm not panicking. I think the act actually does introduce a better standard, and it should professionalize the industry. Industries change and they adapt, and it's about us adapting as landlords and becoming more professional. So if that means working with a letting agent that's really professional, or ourselves taking the burden on and becoming more professional, either way, we should do that. I don't think the government's trying to force you to house bad tenants. So if you look at Section 8, got some clear areas where if there's antisocial behaviour, you can apply to the courts straight away and then seek to try and get possession. So I don't think there's any false measure to get tenants that shouldn't be in the property to live there. It's about giving security. So as long as we work out the kinks with the courts and they're more efficient, and then the introduction of the ombudsman, as long as that's effective and they're well resourced, I think both of them working together could become a more effective system for quicker and fairer decisions. At a macro level, here's 3 things as to why I'm not panicking. One is that prior to 1988, there was no Section 21. It was effectively fixed assured tenancies, and it was about giving good long-term properties to tenants. And so as long as our vetting systems are good, as us as landlords or letting agents, we should be housing good tenants. Actually, it's now more honest for the tenant to prove that they're quality tenants for us to then let them into our properties. As I mentioned, prior to 1988, properties and rents went up, and I'm sure once the Act is actually introduced and it is in force, prices and rents will continue to go up. Number 2, just going back to economics, supply and demand. There's not enough houses, our population is increasing. When we look at that macro level, there's always going to be a demand for good quality rental housing. That's why when we look at the horizon, we see banks like Lloyds getting into being landlords. We see John Lewis looking to then become landlords. So when I look at the macro level, there's a strong demand for rental property from tenants, and there's a lack of supply. Prices always look to continue to go up and support the market. And number 3 is opportunity is on the horizon. You're gonna have landlords who have only known one world and have seen it that they actually got to the age where they've made their money and they wanna cash out. They're seeing this and maybe the introduction of Section 24 just being a bit too much, and they're gonna sell up. But those properties that they've got could have good quality tenants who actually have a history of paying on time and at good rents. There are opportunities to pick them up and invest in properties turnkey. So I think there's going to be some good opportunities to invest, and we're seeing that with our clients. We're picking up some really good opportunities where the yields are really strong, tenants have been in there a long time, and we're getting some nice prices as well. With every challenge, there's always an opportunity. And just kind of where I'm approaching things. Times always change, and it's about us adapting. Section 24, when that was introduced in 2017, there was a massive uproar. When the tenant fee ban came into place, there was massive uproar. I'm sure 3 years, 4 years, however many years down the line, there's going to be more changes, either to the benefit or the detriment of landlords. But we just change, we adapt, we become more professional, we become more nimble. Being a property investor, you have to keep on adapting, and that's in every arena. If you invest in stocks, shares, if you're a business owner, we adapt. That's what I see going forward as well. So hopefully you found value in this video. I know it could have been a bit longer than I actually expected, but hopefully that gives you some reassurance, gives you a plan on how to position yourselves, and also gives you awareness of what's coming down the line.